Hello, guys and gals. Me, Mutahar, and let's just talk about it, ladies and gentlemen. I made a mistake. I ended up buying that Nintendo Switch 2, even though I said that I was going to hold off. I wasn't just going to go buy it outright. And there I was, going on a midnight release, and I ended up picking it, just on a walk-in. Now, of course, ladies and gentlemen, there's no way to sugarcoat or cut around this. I did, in fact, commit a hypocrisy. I made a mistake. I should have not bought this product. Now, I made a few videos on the Switch 2, well, not a few, several, and I've basically covered it. I've not been the most positive viewer of it, especially around certain things like those game key cards, and especially about their TOS, when apparently it seems like they can just brick your systems, and more specifically around the fact that maybe the system is in fact a brick when you ended up picking it up. Now, as you all know, yesterday I made a pretty big mistake. I actually made a video with the Switch 2 inside the actual frame. I actually had one on screen. I bought one. I used it to play Cyberpunk 2077 on it. Now, the reason why this was a pretty big mistake, and I do absolutely believe I should actually apologize to my audience, is I didn't practice what I preached. I said, you should vote with your wallet, and what did I do? I straight up charged my card and got the Switch 2. And for that, it's actually a pretty big apology. Like, there's no way to really say anything. There's no really any way to sugarcoat it. It's an actual mistake. You can sit and blame other people, but ultimately, I think the community kind of made it known that I would be one of those gamers that would fall into FOMO. And even though that I don't personally think that I'm the reason that video games have just gotten more expensive, ultimately, the actions that I did do contribute to the fact that video games would have gotten more expensive, or at least the aspect of it would become more normalized. And ultimately, there's really no other way to, just apologize and say that I'll do better moving forward. And to be fair, the biggest sigh of relief for me is to sit over here and apologize for purchasing a video game system, right? There's a lot of things that a YouTuber can do that would be very illegal, very wrong, ethically, not even just legally, that I could sit down here and apologize for. And that is the only thing that I've really thanked God today for not doing. I could apologize for far more worse, but, realistically, it's just apologizing for purchasing the system that, I kind of made a big hullabaloo about, right? Now, obviously, gaming boycotts are something that, unfortunately, traditionally do not work, just because people end up buying them, and in this case, I was one of those people. Now, I do want to kind of defend myself a little bit and just kind of talk about this, because I don't want to just say that, I don't want to just say sorry. I do want to give an explanation. Obviously, that night I was coming home, bought a Switch, and one of the reasons I wanted to buy the Switch is to kind of look at that brick capability. I wanted to see if you can fire the system up, you can make a local account, you can connect without, utilizing any patches. And thankfully you actually can, as long as you have a Switch 2 and of course a game, which this is something that I'm actually keeping stock, or not just actually, I had a Cyberpunk 2077. As long as you have a game with an actual, completed update on the cartridge, this system is completely usable offline, which was pretty important to me because I didn't want to see another system release as a pure-on brick. So as long as you have a system with, again, a video game, it seems things can just work out of the box. Now, as far as Switch 1 stuff goes, that still needed you to patch for getting the backwards compatibility going in. But if you were just buying Switch 2 games, then surprisingly, everything just worked out of the box. The other thing I wanted to see was, again, the functionality of these games too, especially one game completed on the system. And for that, I played Cyberpunk 2077. In fact, that was a pretty massive section of the video where I just showed the game actually running for anybody to come into the video, watch, and see. Now, I could make the video overly negative, or I could make it overly positive, but the reason I just kind of went the way that I did was I wanted to just objectively look at this product as what it was and talk about things, right? And, one of the things that I kind of read was like, the grifter stuff. You were just grifting on that hate. Well, if I was grifting on the hate and I released that, video, I would probably be overly negative, or I would try to spread some level of misinformation to garner more viewership on hating the device or loving the device. But in reality, I just wanted to cover things from an objective perspective. I wanted to show that there were some games, Cyberpunk 2077, which worked out of the box day one. Now there is like one other game, or I think actually three other games, all from Nintendo that all come pretty much on the cartridge, being Mario Kart World, Legend of Zelda, both Legend of Zeldas, and they all just come pretty much without that game key card stuff. So one of the things that I didn't do in that video was obviously buy the game key card stuff. Like I didn't go out into the store and purchase those gimped copies that I was speaking so much against, which again, I only really bought the system and the one game that was of any interest to me, just so I can show it in the video. And ultimately, regardless of what I'm saying over here, all of that is still a mistake. I was hypocritical. I bought a device that, I actually shouldn't have. I contributed to, unfortunately, a bad practice in the gaming industry, right? Which was supporting this Nintendo system. I did want to cover it from a review perspective. I did want to cover it just from the preservationist perspective to see if a lot of those alarm bells that were ringing literally days before the system was actually launching were actually valid alarm bells. But ultimately, look, at the end of the day, there's nothing I can say to, not accept actual fault at purchasing the system when I made a big hullabaloo about it. And ultimately for that, I do completely apologize. There's no joke, no fun you can make in this manner. I feel like ultimately I do have to apologize for that, and that's what I do. Now, if you're somebody that, is, looking at me and, you don't want to watch my videos anymore because you don't like me anymore because of the Switch 2 stuff, then, I'm sorry. I'm going to have to wave bye. We're going to have to wave bye at each other. All I can really do is say I'm sorry. That's really all I can do. I can't just whip myself or do something to self-flagellate myself just for the camera at this point. All I can really do is say I'm sorry, and I'll do better next time. And ultimately, for me, as somebody that's made tons of videos on countering misinformation regarding game preservation, when people talk about, like, how every disc nowadays is a digital download and there really isn't any way to preserve video games anymore. And I have made videos where I've talked about this. I've corrected the misinformation. For me, the Switch 2 was kind of like that, right? I wanted to see if in this situation, game preservation, at least for fully completed titles, was actually there. Now, obviously, I did make a point in that video, if you watch it, where I said, when this device has 256 gigs on it, buying game key cards, already completely incomplete copies, you're going to be basically downloading and filling your entire new system up with just like, 4 or 5 games effectively down the road. And that's going to become a pretty huge problem, not just for game preservation, but for the average person that, probably isn't also going to spend 80, 90 bucks, 70 bucks, whatever, to buy external media for the system. These are all things that I did talk about in the video, and these were kind of the most important things for me too. The other thing was obviously seeing how a game like Cyberpunk 2077 could run on a newer ARM-based chip device. Now, ultimately, as part of my apology, all I can really say is, look, at the end, I am sorry. I probably shouldn't have contributed to Nintendo's dog shit in video gaming, but ultimately I did. And, I'm one of the bad people in this process. Now, do I think that I'm the most evil person in the world? No, I don't think that. And I don't even see really anybody saying that. But as far as being hypocritical and bad for gaming, I can definitely see how I've contributed to that. And for that, I just really humbly apologize. There's no if, and, or but around it. It is just a straight apology to anybody that felt slighted, hurt, or disappointed in this entire process. For that, my community is pretty important to me. And ultimately, I really did feel like, because I had a platform and I could talk a little bit about the game preservation angle, maybe it was worth showing. To me, if there was something really scathing about it in this device, it would have been a completely warranted purchase, because then I could at least alert some people that, yeah, this thing is actually a confirmed brick. Yes, actually, all these games, even the ones that ship completely on cart, don't just work day one. These would be pretty huge points. But when I actually got the device and I tested it myself, I couldn't find that to be the case. So it was really just to be honestly reporting on something versus, maybe raising more misinformation and hurting myself down the road a lot harder than, the hurt that I've taken right now. But yeah, that's really all I have to say. I can just look into the camera and just say, I'm sorry, I'll do better. And that's pretty much all it comes down to. And the only thing I'm really thankful about here is I could be apologizing for, like, as a YouTuber, there's apology videos that I've watched through my career where people have done really terrible things. And ultimately, this might be one of the worst things that I've done. what genuinely is support bad game practices and, you know, not practice what I preach. I can't make videos where I say I'm not going to be buying a Nintendo Switch, you know, day one at least, and then here I am buying it day one. Even if personally I felt making the content, and at least if I could find something scathing about it, I could talk about, sure. But for me, I'm still not somebody that is in line to be, I guess, known as a hypocrite in this regard. And for that, I do apologize. I've done something wrong, which is purchasing the device after the hullabaloo that I've raised. And for that, all I can do is honestly just apologize. Really, that's all I can do. So if you accept this apology, great. If you don't accept this apology, then it is what it is. But yeah, you know, our word is really all we have. That's really what it comes down to. What I will not apologize for is purchasing and keeping Cyberpunk 2077 on the Switch. I really feel like even if you're not buying the Nintendo Switch 2 and you've got the money, you should probably signal to the industry that buying a completed Switch game, you know, or buying a complete product on launch with all the DLC onto it is something that should be supported, right? You know, especially considering that a lot of games release with tons of great expansion packs that never end up showing up on actual release anymore. Like, they don't get re-released down the road. It used to be back in the day that when a game launched a year later, after it got like 3-4 single-player expansions, you ended up getting like a Game of the Year edition. Now you still get the Game of the Year edition, but sometimes, in most cases, you end up getting like a little piece of paper inside with a code that doesn't even have the whole game. So yeah, for that, I will never actually truly apologize for this, nor will I ever apologize for picking up games like Stalker, which are these completed Japanese re-releases of 3 games on 1 cartridge. But anyways, I'm kind of talking and talking in circles, really. Apologize for the Switch 2 stuff. Didn't practice what I preached there. And all I can say is I'm sorry, and I'll do better. Simple as that. I'm out.